Hi, everyone. We have a very special guest joining us today. We have Brianne Fleming is here with us. She does so many different things. She's a brand coach, a podcast host, an adjunct professor, and she has a weekly Twitter chat that she does. There's no one better to talk about pop culture and how to write for the news than her. So, Brianne, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. We meet again. I'm so excited to
Yeah,
chat.
crossing. It's so exciting. I love chatting with you. So tell us more about what you decided to major in during college and how that led to you working in communications and doing all the fun things that you're doing now.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I started off actually as a journalism major. I had always been a creative person and I'd always grown up reading my teeny bopper magazines and just really falling in love with journalism from those magazines. And that's what I thought I wanted to do, was write for a magazine, become a journalist, write articles. And so I started off as a journalism major, and I later learned that I wanted to be a little bit more creative than just writing. Like, I also enjoyed design, I enjoyed layout, I enjoyed all different aspects of communications. And that's when I actually switched my major to advertising and PR. And another part of just being a journalist that I realized didn't suit my personality was when I was taking intro to journalism, they were really training us on how to be investigative and how to ask the hard questions and how to really get in there and chase the story. And I just didn't think that suited my personality well. I'm not really into like kind of prying or like going and being in those types of sensitive situations, which sometimes the news can be. And I'm really grateful for people who aren't afraid to ask those questions and to serve the public and get answers that we need. But I knew I wanted to be creative in a different way. So yeah, that's when I switched to advertising and PR.
Got it. So what does your day-to-day look like now with so many different things going on?
Yeah, so I do a couple things. As you mentioned, I currently teach branding and social media at the University of Florida. So that keeps me busy. It's really rewarding to give back to students, and I'm excited to be speaking to your class today. But I also work as a community manager for a membership community called Entreprenista, which is all about cultivating a community and a group of female founders and business owners and helping them grow and scale their businesses. And we offer all kinds of marketing resources and how to raise capital and all kinds of education for that. And when I'm not doing those two things, I have spent the last 5 years really being a creator, starting my own podcast called Making the Brand, which, as you mentioned, is a combination of pop culture and marketing, two of my favorite things that I love to combine. And I really learned that it's not just great brands that you can learn from. You can learn marketing and PR lessons from your favorite musicians, from your favorite movies, how sports are promoted. The Super Bowl is coming to Vegas. There's all kinds of PR lessons all around us. And I found that that's how I like to learn. And those are the types of things that I like to study. So my podcast is an opportunity to do that. And then I similarly run a Twitter chat every Friday at 1:00 where I'll take trending topics for the week, and we'll discuss marketing insights from those with a little community of marketers. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, many different things going on. I think once you learn about PR, and as many of my students will find out, you never look at things the same again, because from a media perspective, especially when you get into those national stories where they have publicists and things like that, things are so intentional. And I think when you have the back training that many of us have, it becomes even more interesting because you can watch from the sidelines and be like, ooh, what did they say in their statement? How did they approach this interview? And it becomes way more interesting. So I totally feel you on that. How do you decide? Yeah. How do you decide what to talk about on your podcast? And how do you stay on top of all the news? Because sometimes I'm sure there's so many things to talk about.
I would say I'm genuinely kind of a nerd for the news. Even growing up when I would go to school, my mom would braid my hair every morning, do like this really nice French braid. And I would be sitting in front of the TV watching the Today Show with her. And as I mentioned, I grew up on those magazines. This was pre-social media. I just always loved learning what was going on in the news and in the world and in pop culture, and learning more about the musicians that I loved or the actors and actresses that I loved. So I would say it starts with that, just genuinely liking to be in the know and liking the news and liking to read up when stories break. So when I started the podcast specifically, and one thing you know about me is I'm big into boy bands and kind of that Y2K late 90s pop culture era. I started the podcast talking about those very nostalgic things. And I have a bunch of episodes about marketing lessons from boy bands, or I actually do have an episode about marketing insights from teen magazines and how the teen magazine has changed in the age of social media. So it's just always been something I personally enjoyed first, and the rest has kind of followed after that. So I've been pretty lucky that it's resonating with other people, because I wasn't so sure that other people would like branding lessons from the Spice Girls or some of the ridiculous podcast episodes that I have, but there's an audience for it, I've learned.
Yeah, people have been absolutely loving it. What are your top rules? Or actually, let me follow up with that on one more question. Do you use any specific tools to stay on top of breaking headlines?
Yeah, I am on Twitter constantly, or X. I found that even for journalists or just being in PR and being in the media, it is just the best place to be for real-time breaking headlines. And that's really due to the fact that unlike Instagram or TikTok's pretty good about breaking news as well, but you don't have to create a specific asset. As a journalist or as a media company, you might get an update that's just a text-based post that can just be the news. That's it. There's nothing else that has to necessarily go with it that can delay that news getting out. And just with the nature of hashtags and seeing what people are talking about in that moment, hashtags make it really easy. And Twitter is just the platform that prioritizes conversations more than any other platform. So I'm on there constantly, and the algorithm knows me pretty well at this point and knows what I like to consume. So yeah.
It's always showing it up in your feed. I love that. When it comes to real-time marketing for brands, what are some key rules that you think it's so important for them to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think the main thing you have to remember is with real time, it's really tempting to be quick and to jump on trends as soon as possible. And I do think timing is important. And oftentimes the quicker you are, the more you win, because you look like you're more in the know and you're just on top of that trend. But on the other side of that, you also want to make sure you research that trend and you understand the context of the story. And you're not just jumping in on a topic because it's getting a lot of eyes on it, but you want to make sure that you're sensitive to the situation. We know Duolingo is one of those brands that is really vocal and really on top of trends. And they're kind of known as one of those unhinged brands. But there was one point during the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial where they commented on a clip from that court case and made some kind of joke, and they got a ton of backlash. So if it feels like it's sensitive, if it feels like you're making light of a situation that maybe you shouldn't be, just for the sake of having eyeballs on something, it's probably best to sit that out and just really do your research on the context and the sentiment around that trend or that headline.
Yeah, it can be so important to know your audience. I think that's one of the biggest things, is just knowing what your audience has an appetite for and how things can backfire. I think it's so hard today because a lot of the viral videos and viral stories that come out later on are deemed to be untrue or misconstrued. And that can be really stressful from a brand perspective. So definitely you have to be reactive, but then also take time to take a beat and do a little bit of research too, I think.
Yeah.
When brands do get it right, what do you think are those common components that they have?
Well, again, I do think timing is a big part of it. They get in on the trend or in on the moment at the right time. I also think it's the brands that have good judgment and are willing to take those creative risks. And they've weighed all of their options. And I know there's a lot of times when brands will want to jump in on a trend or insert themselves into conversation. And sometimes it gets lost in the approvals and it has to go up the corporate ladder. And sometimes you miss the boat. So I think it's all about having systems in place, trusting your social media managers, trusting your PR team, having that system in place if it does need to go through an approval process, that it can get done quickly, and just understanding what that process looks like for your team, because these trends are unpredictable and you never know when that golden moment will arise, and the potential that it could bring to your brand if you act fast and act accordingly and with sensitivity. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
What's been one of the most memorable pop culture moments that you've watched from the sidelines?
Yeah. I mean, I thought about this question, and I had to shout out our podcast interview where I got to talk to you about Taylor Swift and the Eras Tour, and how cities across the country were planning this, all of these activations and events around her arrival in their city. And when I spoke to you, I mean, it was still unfolding. We were still seeing how all of these different cities were reacting, and it was really great to get a peek behind the scenes. And, the Eras Tour was so topical. And now I look back on that conversation and I'm not as bitter about it because I finally got to go to the show. Although when I spoke to you, I didn't have tickets. So now I think of it fondly, or extra fondly. It was a great conversation. Another thing I loved, there was a podcast interview I did with this woman named Kiana Davis. She is the one who created the iconic Justin Timberlake meme, the "It's Gonna Be May" meme. And it was just one of those moments where the internet found this person, and I was able to track her down, and she came on my podcast, and just to hear the history of that and to have fun with it, and to see how that meme continues to live on in pop culture, even as some people get tired of it every year. But I really enjoyed that conversation too. Yeah.
That is so cool that you were able to find her. I think we forget that so many of these things just start with an ordinary person or a smaller brand who wants to do something positive. That's what we're finding with so much of what I do in my day job, is these online communities and these really engaged fandoms that make such a difference and can really elevate your content. And especially for brands, I work for the government. We could never afford to pay for advertising to reach those kinds of people. So definitely a lot of opportunity if you know what you're doing and have careful consideration in who you're supporting.
Yes.
Can you give us an example of a brand that you felt like maybe a story was going negatively, but they turned it around through exceptional content or monitoring or response?
Yeah, I remember one of my favorite things, an example of social media gone wrong. HBO tweeted out that one of their interns accidentally sent an email to their entire database, and it was like a test email. Maybe you received it. I think we all got it at the time. And one thing I loved about it is that there's kind of this trope in communications and in this field and social media specifically, that it's always the intern that makes the mistake. And we are trying to change that stigma that, anyone who runs a social media account is just an intern, because it does require true skill. But when they tweeted it, they were like, we're so sorry this happened. Our intern, made this mistake. And they were like, no, really, it was the intern, and we're helping them through it. And what happened after that was it turned into this incredible trend and conversation when all these people were sharing their dear intern stories and mistakes they made in their own internships. And it was really just everyone rallying behind the intern instead of blaming the intern. And I think just for social media as an industry, it was a win to see that, and to see how HBO was honest, transparent, acknowledged the mistake, said that they're helping them through it, showed their support, and then there was a rally of support around it. So I loved how that turned out.
I love that example. And I think we know from working in PR and social media, so much of what fuels the crisis is lack of response. So if you can find a way to make it positive or even just respond and acknowledge, it goes a long way with your audience and can often prevent it from getting off the rails later on. Not all the time, but sometimes. How do you think social media has changed the way we work with the media in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's really personified journalists. And I use Twitter all the time to find an article that I like and then follow that journalist who wrote that article and to keep up with them. I even will will bookmark them if there's something that I know I want to pitch because this journalist always writes about this specific topic. It's suddenly created that access to journalists. And I would say on the other end, journalists are very open also about pitching. Like we'll see a journalist tweet out saying, I just started this new role at USA Today and I'm looking to cover stories on X, Y, and Z. If you have any pitches, please send them my way. Like they're encouraging this two-way communication. And another big change that always fascinates me is media buying specifically. When I was in school, media buying was just all about where are we placing this ad? Like what publication is it going in? What, event are we sponsoring? Where is this going? And now with the age of influencers and creators, it's more about who can we get to promote our brand. It's not always just the thing or just that publication. And what's interesting about that is when you're working with an influencer, there's a big PR responsibility that comes with that as well. I mean, not just influencers, but also just any type of spokesperson or anyone that is another human that's going to represent your brand and put your brand associated with their name. There's a lot of risk that comes with it. So it's another piece that you have to do a lot of research and really trust that person. And you never know if that person's reputation can go awry and your brand can get wrapped up in it. So it's always been interesting to watch.
Absolutely. I think students today cannot appreciate what us PR girls went through before the rise of social media. When I first started working in PR, it's like you could research what they were writing about, but you had no way to connect with them. And you were just like blind pitching them all the time. And some of them were really mean. And there's a whole thing. So you guys definitely have a leg up that you can research these people before you're talking to them.
Yes.
You've worked with a lot of students. What do you think helps students stand out when they're trying to get a job in the world of communications?
Yeah, I would say there's two things I've realized that I can't teach. The second thing I can try to teach, but the first thing I've noticed is that you have to have great judgment. And that's not always black and white. That's not something that, every situation is unique. And there are times that even if you're in this field for decades, like your judgment could be wrong in that situation. We don't have this crystal ball with what could spark backlash or how things could potentially backfire. So just practicing good judgment, really understanding trends and having a pulse on pop culture and on media and just understanding your audience and just being in the know. I found that that's hard to teach because a lot of times these trends, it's all about understanding like, what are they not going to like? What's going to be cringy? What's going to make us look like we're too late to the trend? And it's often hard to articulate those types of things, but you really just have to have good judgment and discernment and follow your instincts and know when we should maybe stick this out or we should go about this differently, or that's not going to work. That's going to rub people the wrong way. Like I said, it's just never black and white. So it's definitely hard to teach that. The other thing I noticed, all these years of teaching students is the ones that stand out really know how to polish their content, polish their writing, and polish their work. This is a field and industry where you really have to sweat the small stuff and how things are communicated, and little typos or designs and things that don't look polished really can seem unprofessional and amateurish. And you might have this amazing idea. And I have some students that are so creative, so smart, but sometimes the execution just lacks that little bit of polish to really make it seem professional. So anything where you can work on that, the AP style book is your friend also, and not making those.
I was just going to ask you about that. If you feel like AP style is antiquated or if you still feel like it's important, but I think you just answered that.
I still think it's important. There's got to be like the go-to single source of truth somewhere. And right now the AP style book is it. So I think it's a tool to make your work more professional, and we should use that tool, in my opinion.
Well said. And they just learned about it. So good that you still feel that way too, because I agree that I still think in every job I've ever had, including the one that I have now, and I've been here a long time, but I was hired to do social media. I still had to take a AP style writing test when I got here. So that I think they weed people out that way to make sure that you are adhering to this standard that we all have learned about. So, as the final question, just in general, what advice do you have for students as they finish college and enter the working world?
Yeah, I think back to when I was a student and I was looking for a career in PR. And I remember what was most important to me was prestige. And I thought it was all about working for a big, flashy brand, just to have this big name on my resume. And I kind of have been there, done that. I've worked for a pretty large brand before, and I've realized that it's not about prestige, that's a really kind of empty goal to have. Is just, I just want to work somewhere that everyone's heard of. That was like my main goal. And I just realized how silly that was, that it's more about doing work that you love in a place that you love that has a great culture. It's not about impressing other people with where you work. It's just about, are you happy? Are you enjoying what you're doing? Do you feel like you're making a difference? So don't be jaded by those big names, those big companies. Oftentimes they're great, but also sometimes they're not at all that they're cracked up to be. So just chase happiness, and it doesn't have to be this huge company. You can find it in smaller firms, smaller agencies, whatever brings you the most joy.
Yeah. And I think it's knowing your passions too, because especially in communications, it just helps you to be a more thorough writer and to create better content if you have a true passion and interest in what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. You got to follow that passion first. And I wish I did that. Even as a student, I didn't think that I could write about pop culture. I always thought I had to have like this corporate ladder. It didn't seem like it was something that was available to me. I had to work for like a Fortune 500 company and that was it. But now I'm having fun, and I feel like I'm being more true to myself. So to that point, that's also advice I would give, is just kind of reflect on what you already love, what part of PR, what industry interests you most, and chase that, because there is opportunity there. You don't have to, do what the universe thinks you should do that's going to look best on LinkedIn. Just follow your heart, as cheesy as that sounds.
I love that. Well, Brianne, thank you so much for being here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be right back.